What's going on, everybody? Kenny here, also known as Sci Guy, or am I Silent Fan 85 or Silent 85? Just a few names that I've gone on, had throughout the years here on YouTube. I've been doing this about 15 years now. I've had a hell of a journey personally, in my personal life, and on stream, on air, in recordings. And, throughout that journey, I've had my struggles, I've had my mental difficulties, as I still do, my mental challenges. And I've been diagnosed bipolar and ADHD, bipolar 2 specifically, and ADHD. Um, I'm a survivor of childhood trauma, as well, trauma, abuse. Um, and, there's been a lot that's happened. As a kid, I was intelligent, I was smart. Because of mental challenges I faced back then, being undiagnosed, I ended up being a high school dropout. I was in college for a bit, but due to life circumstances and finances and family stuff, I ended up having to back out of college. So I just turned 40. It's been a hell of a life so far. I'm looking forward to more. I was married, moved out of state for a bit. Sorry for the glasses. I normally don't wear these with my headset. I usually have my goggles on because these tend to hurt. I've got a bit of a sensitive thing right here on my head above my ears. But I figured this would be about a 20-minute video. I can withstand it just so I can look smarter. But no, seriously, these do have the blue light shield and everything. So I figured I'd wear these. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is part of my journey and answer some questions that I think may or may not pop up from people from time to time here on the channel if you watch my vlogs, if you watch my point of view. I recently did a video called Stories, part title, and I talked briefly about the camera's freezing. Sorry. I talked briefly about how I see stories and how they feed into religion, how stories can have not always a moral, but most stories can have a lesson that because there's human experience in them that's been handed down through our generations. So I wanted to take a minute and answer some questions that were presented in an agnostic interview. It was somebody of spiritual faith talking to somebody that's agnostic. Um, and so maybe it'll give some more insights. I usually, and of course the camera's freezing again, um, usually these videos may or may not cost me some subscribers here on the channel, which I totally get. My channel's always been a bit of a mixed bag. It's my channel, it's my representation, my digital self recording for the future. This channel's my legacy. And it's a part of who I am. It always has been, ever since I started. Ever since my very first video where I was talking about myself, I was endorsing a political candidate, which I do not anymore. That was way back when. Um, all this and that. So, if y'all ever happen to see that first video, again, note that the politician I was endorsing back then, I don't believe it was a mistake, but I would no longer, even if they were still running, endorse them. So I've touched a bit on politics here on the channel. I've made myself, more than out there being an independent. I have some Republican values, but also Democratic values, but there's also in between. I think that having to choose between two parties is uh, dumb. I think we're caught in a trap when it comes to that because once one does something in office, the other comes back in and reverses it, does their own thing, then the other comes back in and reverses that, and then does their own thing, so on and so forth. And I wish I knew why the camera was freezing, but I have no idea. I apologize. It's about the only thing I have right now because money is tight, and I don't know what the hell that was. I don't know. It looked good in my head. Maybe not on a video. But with all that said, that's just some quick highlights of where I'm at, where I've moved from. I was a pure Democrat for a long time. For a long time, I wasn't even involved in politics. But then in 2016, thanks to one Bernard Sanders, the guy kind of woke me up. And, I watched one of the debates. He dropped the word damn. That's how, I guess, innocent I was to politics. I heard a mild curse word. I was like, ooh, this dude means business. And of course, nowadays, um, everything's kind of gone off the rails. So, but then again, who's to say the country hasn't always been like that? I mean, you look at history, you look at how we review things, and um, I am in counseling. And one thing that was brought up in a counseling session is that there are times when I feel oppressed. in some regard, as an agnostic, as a non-believer, so to speak. Um, I'm not exactly atheist. I am spiritual to a degree. I believe we're a part of something greater. There is an energy and a flow to the universe. Science proves that, depending on how you want to view it. Um, you know, there are atomic structures within us. It's a part of something greater. 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 I've listed it out before. We're individuals. It's a part of a family. That's a part of a population. That's a part of a species. That's a part of a planet. That's a part of a solar system. That's a part of a universe, so on and so forth. We're all connected by that. We're all a part of that. This is our life. This is our home. This is our reality. Um, and there's something spiritual to me in that. And I find hope and I find strength in that, in our ancestors, in the people that came before us that weren't always good, weren't always evil. They were human. Um, but there was something along the lines that kept those families going and got us to where we are. Here I am, born 40 years ago. Um, and it's because of my ancestors. And I do find hope in that. I've had my struggles, I've had my darkness, but through it all, I found it myself. I had to refine it myself because the way I'm built mentally and the way I've rediscovered myself is that I find it in myself. And I wish the camera would quit freezing. It's annoying. It's within me. And that's the reason why I wanted to touch on these. And just one more note. A while back, I checked myself in for suicidal thoughts. I was in for about 3 days. And there's one thing I learned in there, relearned, rediscovered about myself. And that's I can pull myself out of any pit. Although help may be warranted, medication may be warranted, but it's up to you to be able to take in family input, friendly input, professional input, and to be able to say, hey, just say, hey, look, you can do this. Take the outside help, utilize it, learn from it. It's there to help, but it's up to you to utilize that and to make the most of it, and to just know and find strength in yourself that you can do this, that you are awesome. That's always been a tagline here on my channel. I thoroughly believe that. I've said that for years. But that's what I found when I checked myself in. I was raised in a church household with more than a few denominations because I was back and forth with family. Family was different on different fronts. And that always, that part of religion always confused me. Why do people believe this, this? History shows us that there were many gods, but then another god came along and they were defeated. I've had people tell me that, and when you look at it, it makes sense because invading countries, invaded other countries, killed their gods. They were forced to worship one god, or they integrated somehow. And so, technically it is true. One god did defeat other gods when you look at the religion of a population. Because intruders or, somebody's being invaded or taken over, again, religions integrate, you get a hybrid, or one religion's just totally wiped out. Those people don't believe in their God anymore. They're forced to believe in this God, so on and so forth. It's a dark history, but it also has provided people with hope and strength. So, there's that. I've seen it with my family. I believe they find truth in it. I believe they find hope in it. They find strength. But one thing I will always argue, and one thing that I will always find annoying is the camera freezing, is that you can't give all. You cannot give everything to an outside source. You've got to keep some for yourself. And I believe it makes a very powerful human being that you can give 100% to yourself. Now, again, we're human beings, so that's not always going to be possible. I really do apologize for the camera. Honestly, it's kind of, I hope it doesn't ruin this video, but I'm on track here, so I'm going to keep going. But look, what's important is that you have faith in yourself. You have confidence in yourself. You believe you can do it. And when I use that term believe, I mean that in how it's supposed to be used. To have faith in future unseen evidence as of yet that you will pull through, that you will get through it, with the help of whatever may be needed. But it's all up to you. And when I was going back to when I checked myself in, I couldn't find that in prayer. I couldn't find that in mantras. I couldn't find that in whatever you would equivocate to those. I found it in me because I was the one responsible for me. I was the one responsible for my life. I was the one responsible for um, any bad vibes I might put out, or any what some people would call evil or bad thoughts. I was also responsible for the good. I was responsible for the lazy. I was responsible for the negative. I was responsible for everything. Everything. It's on me. Anything that comes out of my life, that comes out of my mouth, that comes out of my actions, that's on me. It's not due to mysterious ways of some higher deity or anything to that regard. Now, with that said, there are outside impacts that can affect you as a human being, and I don't deny that. I am a firm believer in the universe, um, karma, yin and yang. I do believe that there is good and evil, but there's also gray areas. Um, we can get into that another time. But let's go ahead and move on to the questions. I'm kind of rambling at this point. This may be a 25-minute video, but this stuff gets deep, so we're going to stick with it. Okay, so first question is, what aspects of your life do you feel are influenced by the possibility of a higher power, even if you cannot definitively prove its existence? Um, okay, so it's a bit of a weird question because, like I said, I do believe in a flow in the universe and a connection to the universe. I think that you can actually apply, for example, you could apply the term God to that. I believe there is a traditional definition of God, a son of God or many gods, Vishnu. I could have that out of context. I apologize, but I was trying to give an outside example. I believe that through, it really, when the term higher power, it could be linked to, again, being part of something greater. But if we're going to look at this from like a personified way of the universe, like claiming that it's a bearded guy up in the sky or something to that regard, I don't believe you'll ever find evidence for an existence in that because um, the more science develops, the more we keep learning as a human species. And make no mistake, a lot of people think, oh, science is definitive. Science is not definitive. Science is humanity exploring the universe, much like we are part of the universe exploring itself. And we're trying to figure this shit out. We're trying to figure out how things work. How are we linked to the universe? Where do things come in? How do they operate? And science is proven because we can reproduce the results. There are obviously thousands of theories that get presented and then disproven along the way. So nothing is ever definitive. The universe is definitive. The rules of the universe are definitive. Math is definitive in a lot of ways, although math can be changed. Physics will eventually be able to be manipulated, I think, as humanity goes along. So, so there's that. But evidence of a higher power, depending on how you want to put that, I don't really think you'll be able to prove it, but you can see it in people. You can see what strength it gives them, what hope it gives them, but also the falls. And to fall from faith that I've seen, when a person falls from faith of a religious concept, it sucks and it's hard because from what I've seen, people give a lot of themselves to that idea. And then when it fails them, that's when it hurts bad. But the same could also be said for you as a person. When you fail yourself, that can also hurt. But I think the difference is that as a human being, you know what you're capable of. Or if you don't, you can prove it to yourself to see what you're capable of. When it comes to the religious ideals on that front, um, that's when it gets tougher because you question them. It's just like, why? Why did you forsake me? Why have you betrayed me? All this and that, and you never really get a definitive answer from what I've seen. And it's always just a feeling of like God is doing this for me, the universe is doing this for me, and so I think that's part of the struggle, and hopefully that answers that question. Um, you're influenced by possibility of a higher power. Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say, but I don't really think there's really kind of an influence. Although I would give credit to certain circumstances unfolding that in certain situations did help me. Again, I don't believe they were guided by a higher hand, but I do believe circumstances along the way dominoed to where a certain area of my life was influenced in a very positive manner, or it helped me because of a series of events that led to that. Totally random events, yes. Higher plan, I kind of doubt it, because when you think of a higher plan, you take away free will, and that's that's not um, the human reality. We all have freedom. We all have free to make our choices. There's always going to be consequences socially when you're a part of a community or even a broad nation or whatnot. There's going to be laws that you can make your decisions and you can take action, but depending on if it's lawful or not, there's obviously going to be consequences. So, how do you navigate conversations where people strongly express religious beliefs, especially when discussing politics, discussing topics like morality or life after death? This is so. I mentioned before that there have been times when I felt oppressed, right? Because I feel like depending on your degree of faith, depending on your willingness to listen and not clam up and close up, hiding behind scripture, or because you just dismiss somebody because that's not how you believe and you don't want to hear it, or you're told that to even hear somebody talk to the opposite of what you believe is the devil speaking, you know? I think it really depends, but when it comes to me, if I can get engaged with the right individual and there is a discussion, um, I will listen. Most of it, well, a good chunk of it, not most, but a good chunk of it, I've overheard in conversations growing up in churches, um, seen on TED Talks, YouTube videos, between friends, between family, um, and it usually just comes down to, again, point of view, point of view. Is there any common ground? Um, I think one of the best examples I've ever had is talking with um, a fairly moderately religious person, not fanatical, but moderately religious. And me at that point, I was still kind of figuring things out, but I was leaning towards the spectrum of again, being a part of something greater, being a part of the universe. And I think what really helps is when that clicks, and it's like, okay, do you refer to an almighty being as God, a person that encompasses all, knows all, sees all, and will inevitably judge you on your passing? It's similar to my degree because I'm not characterizing it as an almighty deity. I look at it as, again, a part of something greater, which is the same core concept. The only difference is there could be punishment involved depending on how you believe. There's a person watching over you. There's a spirit in it. Um, and then on the other side, it's just basically you're just a part of this greater. Um, I'm not sure how to put it. Just this greater thing that we're all connected to. Which again is the same approach to God. It's just characterized or personified in such a way. So, but on my part, there it's been brought up. They're like, okay, do you believe in heaven or hell? I was like, no. The only way I believe in that concept is day-to-day struggles. You can either put yourself through hell, or you can keep yourself in heaven, or somewhere in between. Now, if you have mental difficulties, you can, depending on what you're diagnosed, you're going to live in hell a lot unless you get help. So there's that. But yeah, so it's just basically listening and not clamming up or getting angry because somebody disagrees with you. And you don't just shut your heart off to somebody because they're not speaking your language or wanting to um, acknowledge your beliefs, you know? Um, so it really just depends on that part. Do you think the search for meaning of life is inherently linked to the concept of a God, or can it be found through other avenues? Do you think the search for meaning of life? No, no, I don't actually. So that's basically saying, can you find meaning in life without God? I believe yes, you can. You're your own meaning. Your spouse is your meaning. Your children are your meaning. Your family's your meaning. Your own life is your adventure. That is the meaning of why you're there to me. Um, you can add facets to that meaning. Again, you can help people. You can dedicate your life to charity. You can dedicate your life to um, the law, becoming a cop, becoming a firefighter, helping people. Or you can dedicate your life to fighting injustice and or bad things, you know. Um, you can dedicate your life to teaching. That can give you meaning. Um, Having a greater meaning is, again, you're just contributing to something that is bigger than yourself. You're adding on to that domino effect that may, along the line, whether it's generations due to your lineage, or rather it's socially down the line, you impact people, they impact somebody, they impact somebody, they impact somebody. Um, and there's meaning in that. You know, there's meaning in that. So, um, yeah, I believe it can be found through other avenues. What evidence, if any, would convince you to lean more towards a theistic belief system? Um, None. None. I mean, because again, there's so many contradictions and conundrums when it comes to it. There's enough of those in life without having to worry about additional ones through a theistic point of view or belief system. Um, and it adds on to the fact that there have been so many religions. For last reading, there was over 12,000 active religions in the world today. Today, not counting human history. And the thing is that most of them have believed ours is right. Ours will always be right. We have a doomsday. We're going to live that way so we can get into that heaven, or into that limbo, or into that nirvana. You know. So it just brings about why all this? Because people are looking for hope. People are looking to understand something. You know, people are looking to understand the things happening around them, the good, the bad, the mundane. Um, and our ancestors, that's all they had. You know, it was their way of understanding how things are, why things happen, why things don't happen, why the weather does this, why the land does that, why these things are in space. And I mean, until greater understanding or enlightenment came about, you know, how do you equivocate all that in the universe? And so those stories got handed down, those beliefs, traditions got handed down. Um, and at some point, they became dogma. And dogma is a beast because it's a way to put, in my mind, people in a bit of a mental cage. And depending on how they're brought up, um, it can limit somebody's life to such a degree that I think that it limits their potential as a human being. So so that's just it's the opposite. Um, Basically, everything that's happened, everything I hear, for the most part, everything I've seen, um, there is a there is something behind it that can be explained. It may be a science that we don't haven't fully breached yet or fully understand yet. A part of science, because there's always going to be a new part of science to develop. Um, and so there's that. Hopefully that makes sense. How do you reconcile the idea of personal responsibility with the uncertainty about a higher power's existence? I mean, again, it's you. Hold yourself responsible. For those that don't hold themselves responsible, I mean, they're going to live a rough life, you know, or they're going to become CEOs, or they're going to be sociopathic, you know, or there's going to be something that's like so ego inflated that eventually in life something's going to hit hard, um, and it's either going to be a lesson or something detrimental to their life, because personal responsibility can be taught as growing up without religion. You can teach morality without religion. You can teach responsibility without a deity, without the threat of burning in hell. You know, I would even argue you can teach it without Santa Claus. You can teach it without the Tooth Fairy. You can teach it without anything. You know, it all really depends on how you're raising your kids, how you're influencing your nephews, your niece, your little brothers, your little sisters. You know, are you being positive? Are you reinforcing them? Are you drinking in front of them? Are you getting loud? Are you yelling? Are you abusing them? You know, and if some of the things do happen, and that person takes responsibility for it, the person doing it, and they say, listen, I'm sorry, that was wrong of me. I take responsibility for that. That was not on you, so on and so forth. Examples like that are very powerful to a child. You show them, you talk to them, you look at their life, you see what's around them. And you don't necessarily have to limit them, again, in my opinion, to having just, yeah, there's that. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Do you find comfort in the unknown regarding the afterlife, or is it a source of anxiety? I find comfort in it, and I'll tell you why. Because, again, ancestors, when we pass, we rejoin the universe, and it's a cycle. That's the truth of it, you know. I mean, that's where we're at. You're either in the ground, you're being cremated. Either way, people will, for a while, at least a couple of generations, visit your grave or carry a piece of you with them. Um, but either way, in some regard, you rejoin the planet, you rejoin the universe, you rejoin your ancestors. Now, if you'll actually know them in an afterlife, that's, I think, in regard, there is some thing that can be said about that because, again, if you believe in the energy of the universe and you're rejoining it, technically you're rejoining your ancestors, at least their energy, and becoming a part of them again. So there's that. Now, will you be able to acknowledge them in like a sentient way of being? Again, 99% doubtful. But they're there. They're always with us. We're still breathing the same air they breathed, for all intents and purposes. So, whether you want to look at it spiritually, energy, religiously, it all comes down to the core concept that we will eventually rejoin where we came from, who we came from, in some regard. What are the main reasons you chose to identify as agnostic rather than atheist? Agnostic to me leaves leeway for um, an energy or a spiritual connection, again, to something greater, to the universe, the flow of life, you know, I don't add religious terms to it. I just look at it and boil it down for what it is. You know, we're a part of the planet. We're a part of each other. We influence each other. Um, we're the universe exploring itself, and I'm sure there's even other beings out there. Um, that either have developed, have not yet developed. They drive by Earth and they're like, nope, lock the doors and drive off. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, that would be the reason why. It's just because the way history has shown, what I've seen, um, and everything else. Again, the multiple religions, who's right, who's wrong, the wars, the holy wars, people being empowered to do terrible things, people being empowered to do good things. Um, I think I just that's why I, you know, identify as agnostic because if you were to, let's say, for example, put a claim on a god, I think that everybody's going to have their god in one way or another. Not necessarily a Christian God, Jewish God, Muslim God, but everybody's going to have something in their life that's going to be personal to them that gives them strength and hope. And that can be a god to people. So, but that's about the only way I really see it. And to be atheist, I think atheist is kind of hardcore. Um, I totally respect that point of view. But at the same time, I think you kind of cut yourself off and you limit yourself to potentially at least entertaining the thought of, you know, something greater. But then again, there may be some atheists that are just like, well, no, I don't doubt we're a part of the universe, all this and that. So I think it really just depends on your degree of atheism. Just like there's a degree of theism, you know, it just depends on who you are. Have you ever experienced moments that made you question your agnostic stance, and if so, what were they? Growing up, maybe, but at that point, you're still kind of learning, you know. You haven't fully developed educationally. Um, I think as you're younger, your critical thinking doesn't exactly kick in either. And when you're raised a certain way, you get set to a certain pace, a certain rhythm, a certain frame set in your mind. And it took me years to change that. There are times I'm still doing it. But yeah, so I mean, there may have been things as a kid, but there were also things as a kid that made me believe in Santa or the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, you know? And it's not that I'm trying to put all of those in the same category, but when you look at it from that standpoint, it's all kind of in line. And at some point, you got to recognize that, I mean, there's no real proof for them either. So, you know, um, even coming up, I mean, even as a kid, I wouldn't say I worshipped, but there was characters, a lot of characters from comic books and video games that influenced my life, gave me hope, gave me strength. Um, and I was able to relate to that more than I could in religion. And I'm really sorry about the camera. I don't know what the hell's happening. So we're obviously going beyond the 25 minutes as well. Um, so there's that. How do you approach religious rituals or practices, even if you don't subscribe to a specific faith? This is something I've struggled with. Um, ever since I rediscovered the major part of myself, ever since I rediscovered myself. For a long time, I was obtuse, to say the least, about um, church or any kind of religious talk or any kind of acknowledgement in certain things. And because I, a very dark figure in my life that was religious, that was a part of a community, they had a high standing role in a community, in a church. They were the source of my childhood trauma, of my abuse of both myself and another family member. Um, and so when those repressed memories popped up at their funeral, for a long time, I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I couldn't see my life as being part of that. The only people in my life that um, I could love them for who they are, even though they were religious, was my family. But anybody else aside from that, I was going to find it hard to respect you. I was going to find it hard to even, you know, even want to try to have a discussion with them because it would have felt stilted, and I would have felt denied. I would have felt silenced and whatnot. And that's where those feelings of oppression came about. To where, like, depending on what state you live in, what part of the country, how your family comes up, you can feel like a bit of a black sheep. You can feel like you can impede on somebody's faith. You can make them question somebody's faith. Like, or you could, depending on their degree of it, you could make one statement that'll just break it. You know, and I've seen that. My father went through that. I knew his faith. He was a preacher. He was a pastor. He was a missionary. And a few times in his life, I saw his faith break, and he was in misery. He turned to things that he shouldn't have in order to try to fill that gap. My dad was stubborn. He was stubborn as hell. He was hot-headed, and he had his problems. But when your faith breaks in that regard, it multiplies and amplifies your problems because you've lost that base. You've totally denied it. You want nothing more to do with it. And from what I saw, he was egotistical and pretty obnoxious. But when you look at him, I don't really think there was a whole lot of self-confidence there. I really don't. I think he tried to find it in multiple things, and don't get me wrong, I love my dad, but from what I saw, this is one of the most profound experiences I've ever seen is watching this guy's faith break and what I saw coming up. I've also seen other examples of it, but that was the most personal. That was one closest to me. Um, and so that's how I used to be. I'm still like that in some regard. I still feel like I can't really talk how I want to talk around people because I don't want to be the source of them having to go through what I've seen and what I've seen a person go through. Because to put it in religious terms, it looks like hell, and it probably is. So there's that. But how I approach it nowadays, I'm working on being a lot more open-minded, and I'm a lot better about it. I used to be. I was really open-minded as a teenager in my 20s, but once that repressed shit hit me at my abuser's funeral, now all bets were out the window, man. I went total opposite. I wouldn't say I was hardcore atheist at that point, but at the same time, I couldn't. It was very hard to be around people that were Bible thumpers or were preaching or all this. It was far beyond awkward, as I think it normally would if you're not of that belief. But it was just like, nah, I want nothing to do with it. Sorry. So there's that. But there's also been other instances and happenings in my life that have led and contributed to me getting a lot better about it. There's been proof from other people, from people that I love, that not everybody's like that. Not every religious practice is trying to, recruit you, um, or convert you or whatnot. And any religious practice or ritual that does try to do that, um, it's kind of a sham, you know. I mean, because in a lot of ways, some religions are just all about the numbers. It's kind of like recruiting people for a business, or for, I don't want to use the word cult. That's kind of strong, but it's like the smoking industry. The more people buy cigarettes, the more money these CEOs and billionaires make, the more they can get paid. Um, and when it comes to religion, it could be more people in the church, means more people flowing in, means more money we can spend, especially tax free. Or it means, a bit of a longer term investment for me to get into heaven, or a bigger long term investment for me not to go to hell, or same thing. But it always felt like kind of a pyramid scheme. But at the same time, there's always a positive message that just tried to be spread. I'm starting to see that um, again, and so there's that. But nowadays, I don't go to church. I haven't been to church in a long time. I think the last time I went was last year for an event, a family event for a holiday. But even then, I saw things in the church. I had to walk out because I heard something that I totally disagreed with. I'm not gonna lie, I had this every impulse in me to stand up and say that's not true. And you're hurting people for even saying that, whether they realize it or not. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that. A few years ago, I would have. That's how fiery I was about it. But I'm tempered. I'm becoming more tempered. And in real life, in society, that shit's important. You cannot be fanatical with people. You can't do it. You just can't do it. And if you do it, it's not cool. It's not cool because you're forcing your beliefs, everything on people, on that person. And that's exactly what my abuser tried to do. That's fanaticism. That is a negative impact on society. So, but again, not everything's like that. Do you believe that science can ever definitively prove or disprove the existence of a god? If we're talking the general concept of an almighty being up in the sky, yeah, I mean, I think it's already proven. I mean, there's there's always been this thing growing up. I had two examples thrown at me. I said faith is the evidence of things unseen. Fair enough, but you could also say the thing about the future. You could also say the thing about, atoms. You could say the same thing about the wind. You could say the same thing about this and that. Um, so it depends on how you look at it. And then, in related, I had it thrown at me as a kid, and it made sense at the time because it's like, oh, you're right. People said, you feel the effects of the wind. You can feel the wind, but you can't see the wind. So how do you know it's not God? And then you grow up and you learn, and scientifically based evidence show how wind comes about. How tides are made, how the water moves, all this and that, and you learn about gravity, so on and so forth. So um, I think it just depends on critical thinking. You know, it it's required, it's needed as you get older. So I think it's already proven in one way or another when it comes to that iteration of the word God. I think that's been proven. Now again, people can have their personal gods. They can have the things that give them faith and hope. But yeah, there's the answer to that. So um, a couple of tips. If you're ever going to talk to somebody real quick, we're going on 40 minutes. But again, this shit is deep. Um, a couple of points whenever you are talking to somebody like myself, um, respect the stance, respect their stance on not knowing for sure, um, based on your experiences or your beliefs of their God, of your God's existence, so on and so forth. Don't preach at them. Don't be a Bible thumper. Don't say, if I've got a good message for you, but if you don't accept it, you're gonna burn for eternity. Especially for Cthulhu's sake, don't tell a kid that. Do not expose them to the lifestyle of, if you don't raise this way, you're gonna burn in hell for eternity. And especially if you're going to take a physical aspect to it, if they start to question it or talk about things that are not related to God and they start to sound secular, and you're a hardcore Christian family growing up, don't physically reprimand them. Don't whoop them. Don't slap them. Don't do anything in that regard. Because number one, that's fucking child abuse. And number two, you have no justifiable reason for doing so. I believe you want to raise your kid the right way. That's fine. If that's how your parents raised you, so be it. But to force something like that on a child is, in my opinion, a bit of an abusive stance, because you're essentially threatening them with an eternity of torment. Now, can you imagine if a stranger came up and told your kid, listen, unless your parents raise you right, they're going to burn in hell for eternity. You won't be with them, you'll be in heaven, but your parents won't be there with you and they'll be burning. This shit, it can fuck somebody up. Excuse my language, but it can. And it's stuff that needs to be learned, and it is being learned through current generations. Thankfully. Thankfully, I'm very proud of the generations today. A lot of people might call them lazy, stupid, the planet's going to go this way and that, whatever. Generations before our generations have said the same damn thing, and we're still here. It's important to do that. It's important to not throw it at people, abuse people, tirade people, browbeat. Have a damn discussion. Come at it with an open heart, lighthearted, with an open mind. And of course, I'd say the same thing to agnostic or atheists. Respect people for what they believe, so on and so forth. Focus on the understanding of their complexities of life meaning, and without a definitive answer for anything. You know, avoid leading questions that might pressure. To choose a side. That's important. Do not try to force a side. Do not try to get them to admit that they're wrong. There can be passionate discussions, and when that starts to happen, I would walk away, which is what I tend to do. I'm not going to, again, I don't want to pressure somebody and break somebody's faith, because that's a personal hell, again, from my experiences and what I've seen. So, 45-minute video. Listen, if you have made it this far, feel free to leave comments. Keep them civilized. I'm going to vet them. Comments are not going to be disabled, but if you made it this far and you want to comment, so be it. Put your story out there if you want to. But if it's toxic, if it's negatively leading, if it's just any of that regard, it's not going to be posted. But I did want to post this because I got a series of videos coming up showing collections, but also touching on stuff like this, reviewing stories, talking about my favorite stories coming up as a kid, how they impacted me, how there were parts of religious stories and upbringings that did have a positive influence on me. And in regard to morality and religion, I do think that religious stories do help. I do think that some parts of religion do help instill morality in people, but at the same time, I can touch on this later, but I think it's also not required for religions to teach morality. Our ancestors were caring people, war people, obviously. Tribes wiped out tribes, but there were communities that took care of each other before verbal communication even. They watched out for each other. They were a part of a tribe. They cared. They loved. They took care of. They respected their elderly. And they didn't know anything about a religion. I think for most of us, it's instilled that to feel compassion, to feel empathy. Now, there are people that are born without it, but that's just how they're built. That's just their mind. It's how they are. But I think for most people, it's there. And depending on how your life goes, you can either forget about it, it's hardened to such a point that you can't do it anymore, or you can have too much of it. And I think that both sides of that, that can be torture. But to find that balance, I don't think religion's required for that. I think, again, that can be taught without religion, and I've seen it. I mean, you can see it in families that have nothing to do with religion. Um, so anyway, there's that. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Stay sane. Remember, you're awesome. Never let the world tell you otherwise. And thanks for sticking around. I apologize for the camera. I don't know what the hell is going on. It's doing it again. It seems like the more motion it freezes. Maybe not. I think I'm trying to summon something. Freeze! Didn't work. I have no power. But I can end it here. Remember, you're awesome. Never let the world tell you otherwise. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, for listening to my point of view and input, experiences, part of my story. And you're a terrific human being. And it's all based on how you want to go about it, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. See you.